And today's session will focus on multiple intelligences and how they could be used in a classroom setting. And we have a very special facilitator today. Pearl ma'am has been associated with us since the very beginning of Centa, I should say, since 2015, and she's been a participant in and a winner in multiple editions of the Centa Teaching Professionals Olympiad, and she's also a Centa certified teacher. And of course, she's from Red Brick School, Ahmedabad. So
Thank you so
yeah,
much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Pearl from Red Brick School, Ahmedabad. I'll be talking about multiple intelligences in the classroom. Yes. When we talk about multiple intelligences, I think a lot of you are familiar with this concept and probably use it a little bit in your classrooms already. What we're going to do today is just look at it in the classroom in its physical form, how we can use it in activities in classrooms or assessments and things like that. So the entire flow of the workshop is going to be like so. We're going to start with a warm up to sort of get you into the mood. And then we're going to look at multiple intelligences, what it is, how it's relevant to a classroom, how we can identify students having different MI, also how to incorporate it into lesson planning, in assessments as well, and then we're going to do a little bit of question answer round before we close the session. Yeah. Um, Before we start in the warmer, I'd like you all to look at these questions. Take your time, read through the questions, and then move into www.menti.com. The code is given on the slide. You need to answer these 5 questions. Please make sure you're very honest with the answers. The first thing that pops into your mind is generally the answer that you are looking for. So you have to just give me these 5 answers in the first slide on menti.com, which I'm going to open up for you all. Just read the questions. The first question is, what's your favorite subject in school? The second is, during your free time, what do you like to do generally?
Okay.
The TV the TV programs that you enjoy the most are based on. Now, here you have to look at the theme of the program. Is it cultural shows that you like? Is it dramatic movies or mysteries or what is it? The fourth one is, if you have to perform in a play, what kind of role would you prefer the most? Now, this doesn't have to be on stage roles, it can be back end roles as well. And the fifth one is, if you're studying something or researching on something, how do you tend to take notes? Do you highlight things? Do you illustrate? What do you do generally? So these are your 5 questions. I'm going to put them up again for you, but let me show you at the Menti site. Okay, menti.com 636228 will be your code. Yeah, if you can start putting up your answers, we'll get to see them up here. Your questions are like so. Favorite subject, favorite pastime, TV program, a role in a play, and how do you tend to research? Okay, we've got a couple of answers up here already. Science, we have mathematics, we have science again, a lot of science subjects. Okay, a lot of math as well. And there are people who like to make mind maps, underlining things, taking short notes, cookery shows, okay, comedy shows, action movies. You can see the variety of answers that are up here. A lot of science, math, and English teachers. Okay, I'll give you one more minute, maybe a couple of more answers to see any other variety that we can come up with. Okay, some people like dominant female role kind of movies and series. Science and cooking, okay. Okay. Okay, we'll stop at that. If you look at the screen, the entire screen out here, you can see the variety of answers that we're getting in. I know there are some common elements like science and math and English and things like that, but you can see the choices are so different. Some of them like fantasy and fiction, some of them like woman-dominated movies, some of you like science fiction-based movies, some of you are more into comedy and different sci-fi fiction, things like that. So what I'm trying to make a point of here is, when we look at our interests, we have so many kinds of interests, and this kind of defines the kind of person we are. Now, how do we look at these interests? I'm going to move on to the next slide. I would like you to stop voting over there so we can focus on the next question that you're going to look at. Okay, we're going to figure out what kind of smart you are individually. Okay, in this, I'm going to discuss around eight smart items that we're going to look at, and you have to identify the smart you are. So, if I'm describing eight different intelligences for you, you're going to identify at least two intelligences that are dominant in you as a person, and you have to be very unbiased and very open-minded about this. So the first one is body smart. So if you are a person who loves dancing or doing hands-on activities, going on adventure sports, you can't sit still for long seminars, you like to do things instead of just sitting around idly, you're a body smart person. If you are a picture smart person, you tend to enjoy artwork, painting, you get lost in beauty of scenery, you get lost in puzzles, generally puzzles which are pictorial, and you really enjoy photography or at least looking at photographs. You probably enjoy movies as well, especially movies which have a lot of dramatic graphics and things like that. We also look at people, smart people who are good with relationships. They maintain positive relationships. They get along well with people. People look up to them for advice because they're so approachable. They can resolve conflicts very quickly. So if you're that kind of a person, you're probably a people smart person. You can also be a word smart person. You probably love reading. You're very good with language. Now, language doesn't mean only English. It can be any kind of language. You might be very fluent with your mother tongue and no other two languages. Doesn't have to be English. You can be very good with dialogue or speeches or just conversation, communication with people. You don't feel uncomfortable doing that at all. Um, when you look at music smart, you might be the person who tends to hum while you're working or maybe in your shower as well. You might also remember songs and melodies from things that you have heard recently or long time ago. You probably remember things when you give them a tune or a rhythm. You can be a self-smart person where you are probably aware about yourself. So you're very reflective about your own strengths, weaknesses. You look at yourself and then figure out what are the things that you're doing right in your life, what are the things that are wrong in your life. That kind of a knowledge that you have about your own self without people telling you what it is. That's a reflective or a self-smart person. You can also be a logic smart person. That means you love problem solving, you love experimentation, you like trying out new things which are things that you have not experienced before. You probably love complex computations or very complex puzzles, 3D puzzles and things like that. You can be a nature smart person as well. Somebody who's interested in the sciences, pure sciences, botany, zoology, biology, probably love exploring outdoors, probably go on nature walks, camps, and things like that. You probably look at movies which are more inclined towards nature related scenes or those kind of themes. So look at all of these eight smarts that we have up here. Think about what relates to you the most, the top two things that relate to you the most. And we'll move on to the next slide on the Mentimeter. And you'll put up two votes there. So each vote is going to represent what you're good at. Okay, so only you can choose only two of these options up here. I would like you to vote right now. Maybe we can give it a couple of minutes to see everybody put up their votes, and we will see what kind of a balance we have amongst the audience. Yeah, we got a first vote already. Interesting. Bodily kinesthetic is still high. Okay, we'll give it around a couple of minutes and then we'll see where the scores are at. Okay, we've got 46 people voting. We'll stop at 50. Yeah, thank you. So I have stopped the voting out here. Let's look at the ratings that we have. We've got a lot of people who are bodily kinesthetic, naturalistic, and interpersonal. And I can kind of guess that maybe this row, the naturalistic teachers, are largely science teachers, I would say. And these ones are very outgoing and they like to make friends and probably have a lot of friends. If you look at the entire row out here, there is kind of a balance between what you see amongst different people, the kind of intelligences we have. If you go back to the PPT, when we talk about Howard Gardner's theory for multiple intelligences, these 8 smarts can be represented like this. Music smart is basically musical intelligence that you can have. Bodily kinesthetic people are body smart. Interpersonal intelligence indicates your people smart. Linguistic intelligence indicates your word smart. Mathematical logical intelligence indicates your logic smart. Naturalistic intelligence indicates that you're nature smart. Intrapersonal intelligence indicates that you're self smart. That means aware of yourself. Visual spatial intelligence indicates your picture smart. Now, when we say visual spatial, it also indicates you're good with estimations and things like that. So, architecture is something that you would like to look at. Interior is what multiple intelligence is about. Now, when we look at multiple intelligences, it doesn't mean that I have one or two of these intelligences. We have all of these 8 and some more. I'm going to talk about the some more a little later. But if you look at these 8 intelligences, every person has all of these. It's just our experiences, the hereditary influence that we have, all of those things that make us unique from the other. So we have skills that have developed with time because we have watched our parents, because we have watched other people around us, or we have experienced things differently from another person to build on specific intelligences. That's why we are dominant in certain intelligences. That's what happens in your classrooms. Every child, when they come to your class, they bring some kind of background experience with them, because of which they have some intelligences which are strong and the others are kind of something that they're not comfortable with. Howard Gardner also talks about 2 other intelligences, existential intelligence and pedagogical intelligence. We're not going to talk much about it, but I'll just give you a touch up on that. Existential intelligence is largely people who understand the big idea, or they reflect on questions, big questions around the world. Why the universe exists, what is my role in the universe, spiritual kind of questions or philosophical kind of questions. Whereas pedagogical intelligence is students or people who can communicate knowledge or transfer knowledge to people. That kind of intelligence. Now, this is something that is still in progress, work in progress. There's not a lot of information about it. Existential is still coming into the picture, but we focus largely on these 8 intelligences, especially when we talk about classroom experiences. So what we're going to do is, when we look at MI in the classroom, we're just going to think over this line now. This is something I got from a blog that I had read. A school governor had asked a teacher this, had informed a teacher this, that we should allow all the fish to swim, rabbits to run, and the eagles to soar, but we cannot have a class full of average ducks. Now, if my classroom strategies are designed in such a way that I teach the way I'm comfortable, I probably love bringing audio video to the class, or I probably love to do artwork and craft work in the class. Now, that is my skill. I'm comfortable with that. I bring that to the class, and the students who like that skill, they are going to have fun doing it, and they're going to learn that way. But when we talk about the other kids, the ones who want to swim, or the ones who want to run, or the ones who want to soar, you're probably not giving them enough experiences if you're not bringing all the MI into the classroom. Now, this is obviously a challenge because we have limited time in the classroom, we have limited resources, and we have a big curriculum to fit into all that. So, how do we get about to doing all that? That's what we're going to look at. Yeah. So, if you look at classroom, this is what your classroom is going to be like. You are going to have students who have strong intelligences. Some of them might have bodily kinesthetic intelligence, so they are very restless. They cannot sit in one place in your classroom. You might have students who are very mathematical, logical, but they may not be so interested in nature sciences or natural sciences, so they're not so naturalistic yet. There might be students who love interpersonal relationships. They like to talk to other people instead of self-reflecting. So these strengths might vary. So how do you make your strategies sort of reach or connect to all of them? That's what we're going to look at. So first, before we figure out how to put it into the classroom, we need to figure out why we want to do it in the first place. Okay? So if you look at MI, the engagement levels in your classroom, this is through experience that I'm speaking, it's on a high. All of your kids, no matter what they are performing at academic scores or whatever it is, they have 100% engagement in your class because they don't feel left out. They have their skill being addressed. They feel so comfortable when the teacher gives them something that they are comfortable doing. Okay, and that's what you want in your classroom. You want all your kids to participate one way or the other in your classroom. And when they do that, obviously everyone's having fun. It's you having fun, it's your kids having fun. Now, this fun, initially when teachers tend to use MI in the classroom, they think that, discipline goes for a toss, that people are being loud or it's becoming noisy or it's out of control. That's the first phase. When you introduce MI for the first time in your classrooms, yes, you're going to have a lot of excitement in your classroom. You might have some discipline issues because they're having so much fun, they don't want to listen to you for a minute. But if you keep introducing these opportunities in the classroom, the kids get it. They get that they're going to have these experiences and they can time themselves better to see the activity for what it is. And that leads to increased responsibility and self-motivation. So they sort of participate more in your class because they are responsible for their own activity. I will talk about how they can be responsible for the activities in the next few slides. But then because they are so engaged, the discipline factor that we are concerned about, that goes down. Your children are so cooperative because some of them will have stronger skills, especially if you have mixed groups. The one who has a stronger intelligence tends to teach the others and show the others what they really love about that particular task they're doing. So this is something that encourages cooperative learning in your class. If we look at the entire experience of bringing MI into the class, you obviously develop new skills because you're introducing things that children are not comfortable with as well. If there is a naturalistic person who's not very bodily kinesthetic, by giving them activities that require bodily kinesthetic movement but also has a touch of nature, that's where they build on the other skill as well. And obviously with all of this, you're going to see academic improvement because they are paying attention in your classes. So how do we go about doing this? First, we need to identify the MIs that our children have or multiple intelligences that our children have. The most obvious way is obviously observation. You have to look at them during their class participation. You have to look at them during their class work, how they contribute to your classrooms. Do they like to speak out loud? Are they very reserved, but when they write down things, do they give you better points in their written notes? Are they kind of students who enjoy your classes when you're going out on a field trip or a nature walk? Are they students who like to do hands-on things? Or are they students who like to do research by just reading and making short notes out of it? All that is going to give you the strengths of various kids. You don't have to be perfect at it, but you kind of know where their interest lies, and you can see the majority of your class inclined towards a particular skill, or there are batches of students inclined to a particular skill. That helps with your planning as well. Second is you can have questionnaires or checklists specially designed for this. So it's a less than 5-minute task where you give them a checklist, they rate themselves on things that they really like doing, and they can assess what kind of intelligence they are dominant in. That gives the student as well as you an insight on what intelligence they're strong at. We can also look at hobbies and interests that children have. They already obviously talk about it in the class, what they love doing. That gives you an insight into their multiple intelligences. Even your extracurricular, co-curricular classes or field trips where your children are enjoying dance, maybe your sports, all those kind of experiences give you the at ECA, CCA. Generally during your sports sessions, you will see children who don't really like your sports session, and there are students who really like it. So the ones who don't like it, you know that they are not very great at their bodily kinesthetic intelligence. They probably are too shy to go out there, or they doubt themselves. So how do you get them engaged in this? Is doing activities in your class that have them moving around, have them using their hands, using their bodies to do things. We're going to look at some ideas on how to do this a little later, but this generally gives an idea of where your students stand as a class as a whole. Academic performance obviously also gives you some insights. You can see how children score at particular questions. Do pictorial questions suit certain learners? Do descriptive answers suit learners? Are they struggling with the language in the paper? Those kind of insights you can get through of the MI that sort of is strong in your class. So we're going to look at how we can incorporate MI into the lesson plan. Obviously, the first thing that teachers really want to do is individualized instruction. When I say individualized instruction, that means I want to give instruction per child. Now, if you look at a classroom, obviously, this seems like an impossible task because we have a limited time. We have 30 to 40 kids in our class. How do we go about individualizing instruction? MI is one of the best ways you can do it, because in MI, when you use strategies where you're mixing up things, you're giving them activities which are hands-on, there is always a chance for you to group them according to that. So there are groups where you can form, where they are doing something related to a musical task, or they are doing something related to a bodily kinesthetic task. We're going to come to these examples later, but if you can see, if you have grouped these students according to their skill sets and given them a graphic organizer which guides them through the mini activity, you're individualizing instruction for that group of kids. So that is what you're looking at when you're doing MI. When you distribute all these kids into their strengths or mixed grouping, whatever it is, you're tailoring to their need individually, because you're giving them that comfort of what they're strong at, and also guided instruction into things that they're not really great at right now. This you can do by presenting content in various ways. Now, what I'm doing here is obviously very linguistic. I'm showing you a PPT and talking about it. But if you use audio visuals in the class, if you use clay models in the class, if you ask them to move out and look at things out there in nature, you're presenting content in very different forms. And that's why you're catering to every child's needs. So somebody who likes nature walks, they're actually looking at your content out there in nature. Somebody who likes experimentation, you probably brought a tiny 5-minute experimentation in the class, but then that sort of connected to them. So that is something that you can do. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. Even when you check understanding, when you're doing assessments, formative assessments, especially in your class, you can vary the way in which you do it. Not always do a paper pen test. You can have them share things in different ways. You can give them freedom in the way they want to share things as well. We're going to talk about this as well a little later. I know a lot of things we're going to discuss later, but you'll be happy, don't worry. Um, we also have to look at complex content. Now, when I talk about complex content, it can be new content that you're introducing in the class, or it can be content which is theory heavy or really packed with so much of new information that you don't want to do it as a theory session, but you're forced to because there's a time crunch. So here, there's a strategy called stations that we can use in a classroom. I will give you an example of how to use stations, but in brief, when we say stations, it is multiple kinds of tasks addressing the same topic. And this is done in the span of 1 or 2 sessions. Max, generally we try to do it within one session. An example will be shared for this. You can also think of heterogeneous and homogeneous grouping. Now, when I talk about heterogeneous grouping, you all obviously are familiar with it. It is a mixed group. Now, it can be based on skill sets of students. It can be based on the topic itself, how comfortable students are based on the topic you're covering. Maybe they have some experience or no experience about it. You can also do it based on intelligences that we have already discussed. So this kind of grouping really helps. If it is heterogeneous, obviously the one who's strong with that intelligence guides the others and teaches the others to enjoy this particular intelligence. If it is homogeneous, obviously everybody is comfortable in that particular intelligence or they are not, and they sort of figure out how to deal with that within their group. And that's what you want during cooperative learning. So some examples for MI in a lesson plan. If you're using logical mathematical style, obviously number lines, graphs, puzzles, brain games are something that you want to use. Now, this is not restricted to math. It can also go into language. It can also go into science. It can go into any subject you want. You can always have puzzles and brain games in anything. Number lines in history. So always try to think of things from different subjects as well. That really helps you with MI. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence, when I talk about manipulative, it can be anything that is hands-on. It can be clay, it can be straws, it can be sticks, it can be something that they're going out and collecting from their outside their classroom or from the ground. You can have body formations to theorize something. Just movement in the class is when you're doing groups which require movement. So you do jigsaw grouping, they're moving around. Okay, so these kind of kids need to move around and they cannot sit in a place listening to somebody, and you need to engage them in different ways. Linguistic children really like having something pictorial or graphical in front of them. So what we tend to do is we bring pamphlets or posters from out there, real actual pamphlets and posters for them to see on a concept. If it is pollution or save water, somebody would have posted something to you or something would have come up online. They look at that. They look at newspapers. They probably look at picture books as well. If I'm talking about visual spatial intelligences, when I talk about dominoes, this is not restricted to just visual spatial is just not pictures and model making. It can also be cause and effect mechanism. So anything that they have to set up and construct also comes under visual spatial. So if I'm using dominoes to show cause and effect, that's something that I'm doing to engage this particular child who has this intelligence. If I'm using clay or Play-Doh to do something in the class to represent some model, I'm doing visual spatial with them. If I'm asking students to represent a science fact like friction using models, then yes, that's also visual spatial because they're creating something. And there's obviously some bodily kinesthetic element in there. If you're doing naturalistic, obviously a nature walk is the best way you can do it. Just going out onto your campus, looking at nature is something that they love. This can be for art as well. If they're looking at different shades and hues of trees, they can do that. If they're looking at how chlorophyll is sort of helping a plant to make food, if they want to do an experiment, go out in nature, do it in your garden, and then test the leaf that you sort of want to test. So try to connect with nature as much as you can, wherever you can, because as you saw the previous slide where we did a voting, a lot of kids are naturalistic, even adults, because that's the first exposure that we have. As we are born, brought into this world, naturalistic intelligence is the first thing that is sort of going to be expressed. Um, and there's also this understanding that every child, every adult, every child, human beings generally tend to figure out things through senses. So obviously, visual spatial intelligence and linguistic intelligence is something that's the first exposure that they have in their life. They do learn that way, but doesn't mean we limit that learning to that kind of style. And that's what we're looking at out here. Interpersonal, intrapersonal, we talked about. The more grouping you have, the more interpersonal connections you have. Intrapersonal, when you have reflective writing. A lot of teachers tend to miss this out in the classroom. If you give a child time for reflective writing or just to look at what they have done and talk about what they could have done better or what they could have changed in the task that they did, that really helps them think over what they have done. So giving ourself feedback is the best thing you can get a child to do, and that can happen during journal writing. Obviously they can do a journal write up at the end of the day to talk about their day, things that they would like to differ from, or things that they would like to do better next time, or things that they did really well. You can have individual rubrics for them to check their own work. You can have self-assessment checklists, so they're looking at their own task and they're assessing what they missed and what they did. These kind of tasks generally require minimal teacher guidance, but it is good to touch base with them to figure out if they're going the right way or if they need support from you. The last is obviously musical intelligence. Having sing-song rhythms and rhymes in your lessons is something that they really have fun with. I have had students make rap songs regarding science concepts, and you have no idea the things that they come up with. We as adults might feel really embarrassed about doing something like this, but your kids will come up with amazing things. So you have to give it a try, even if you're not a musical person, like just like me. Yeah. So we are going to move into very specific examples that have been tried and tested in my classroom. The first thing that we had done when we did a geography theme, they had studied about physical features of a particular place, and at the end, as a formative assessment task, they had to create brochures to entice tourists to visit the place. So they had to highlight things that are special about this place. So they had to gather pictures that they could. They had to use fancy fonts. They had some of them even came up with packages. So 3 days and 4 night stays, this kind of a package, and you get to have breakfast at this particular inn, which is really popular in this area, those kind of things. So they actually go into extensive research to create these brochures. And especially now when all of your kids are doing online teaching and learning, this is something that they could love doing because they have resources handy with them. Stations, what I talked about earlier. Now, stations is generally for research on a new concept. So you can have multiple stations. It can be 2 to 4 to 6, whatever number of stations you want, depending on the time crunch and the resources that you have. So if I have stations in my classroom, the first station for any topic can have maybe printed information about the topic. So this is research based, and there will be MCQs related to the content that is printed out. So children read and fill the MCQ. They move on to the next station. So these are all in groups where groups are exchanging stations when they're working along. So the next station would have maybe flashcards or realia. Realia is real objects that they can touch, feel, see. So they have these that can be categorized or sorted under 2 classifications maybe, or they have to reason why they have done so. This doesn't have to be only science. It can be grammar concepts that you're using in English. It can be math concepts that you're talking about. If you have a particular task, what can be added, what can be subtracted, those kind of things. The station 3 can have a laptop or a tab, something that has an IT connect with maybe a video for students to watch. It can also be an audio clip that the children listen to. And they have a graphic organizer, take short notes about what they heard. So this is also something like research that they're doing. And the last station can have material where they hands-on create, either solve a puzzle or maybe create a sketch or a model with modeling clay. And the model can be with anything else other than clay as well. They can use indigenous materials from their classroom, or you have to tell them figure it out, try to pick something from your classroom and show me this representation. For instance, if you have simple machines, if you ask them take something from your classroom and show me what a liver looks like, okay, if that's the task, they can actually do it out there. So you don't need a lot of resources for this. You just have to think of the concept, think of the time and space that you have, and then the station ideas do come up. I'll be sharing a few resources where there are people who have used stations and some ideas have come up there. So you can look at that and then you can tailor that to your classrooms as well. I've also had students creating a documentary for a historical topic. So here, when we give them option to create a documentary, it's very open-ended. They can do it the way they want it. So when I say the way they want it, I have had students come up with minds. I have had students having donning costumes and doing an actual play to represent the whole freedom struggle of India. I've had children trying to do interviews with people from that era, again, full on costumes and accent and things like that. So obviously these things need time. So what I tend to do is I give them a couple of sessions in the class to prepare, and then I give them a week or two span for them to give finesse to their entire presentation, and I do the entire presentation at the end of 2 weeks or something like that. So you have to give a realistic time span and that kind of guidance to them so that they're not overwhelmed, but they have something interesting to do. And giving them choice to do the task, that's what MI is about. Children might be comfortable with just looking at the costumes that they want to design. Children will be comfortable with creating the dialogues that people are going to say. But that's how they come together, because in the end, you want them all to know the historical topic. While they work together, obviously they're discussing. They understand the entire end-to-end program that they're creating, and they're using their intelligences, and that's what you're looking at. We have also had children create a mini display of artifacts from a historical topic. So in this Valley civilization, if they have learned something about it, at the end they have to just create a small display where they have represented artifacts that were recovered from this era, and they have to give small descriptions about it. So obviously this reinforces the concept that they've learned in history. The last one is exploring different types of rocks. Maybe you can't see it, but it's exploring different types of rocks through experimentation observation. So what we did was we did Mohs hardness tests where they had to scrape the rock on different objects and see if the rock got scratched, and based on that they could figure out the mineral that the rock is made up of. They also had scratch tests. They also saw if the rock can absorb water or not, if the rock had patterns, if it had shells and stuff in it. So all those things were sort of put up in a graphic organizer. So when they look at the sheet, they do the test. They test their rock, whatever rock they have picked from their homes, and they figure out what kind of rock it is. And just with this small activity, they really enjoyed learning about rocks, minerals, and soils, which is generally a boring topic for children who are not interested in such a theme. So these are a few of the examples that we have done in classrooms, and obviously there are so many ways in which you can do these concepts. But I think this gives you an idea of how to bring MI in the class. Now, if you look at the first one there, brochures, the kind of intelligences that we're dealing with, we are looking at pictures, obviously, so visual spatial. We're also looking at language because they have to write the brochure down, so linguistic skills, and obviously they're trying to communicate with people. So when they're doing it in a team, their intrapersonal skills come in there, interpersonal skills are coming in there, and they're also reflecting what tourists would like, what I as a tourist would like to look at in the brochure. So there are so many intelligences just in that one particular topic that you're doing. Stations, obviously, every station is covering a different kind of intelligence. Because they're working in groups, they're all working together as cooperative learners. In station 1, you're looking at MCQs and printed information, so linguistic skills. The second one, flashcards, so visual spatial skills. We're also looking at a laptop video played, and that's where you have visual spatial skills as well as musical skills coming in, if there is obviously a musical element into your video. The last one, obviously, the station 4 represents puzzles or hands-on things. So you have bodily kinesthetic, which with a touch of visual spatial as well. The documentary again has a blend of all these. So if you see, every task caters to multiple intelligences. So if I'm designing a task catering to MI, it doesn't mean that it's going to take a lot of time. It doesn't mean it's going to take a lot of effort on my part, or the students are have to be tailored to different tasks every time I do things. Each of my tasks is able, the way I design it, it can cater to multiple students at the same time, and that's what I'm looking for, that my task is so broad ended and it has opportunity for choice, that my students have choice the way they want to represent things or they want to work in that particular task that they've allotted them. So that's about MI in the classrooms. We can also use MI in assessments. So formative assessments, obviously, we don't want it to be all paper and pen tasks. There are some tasks that we have given students where they have to create a documentary, like I just said. I have also had students create models. So if they have learned something about force energy motion, I've had them demonstrate force or the use of energy or how motion changes in different circumstances, things like that. I have had students create.
She will take
Somebody
for
is not
around
on
20 to
mute.
25 minutes. Then 5 minutes you give an intro about that Namaste program. Okay, that one, because if you say it will be nice, because I'm
Okay, I'm
not
just
good,
going to
I don't know, I
continue.
have to go into that. Just to be
Okay.
told few teachers, I don't know
For
whether they have
individual
tried or
tasks,
what.
we
Just to
have
look
also had
into that and
awareness
then
drive.
just give
So
them an idea of how it should be like.
for instance,
Okay, yeah,
when we
yeah.
did segregation of waste all over India, we had students actually go door to door and
Yes,
they question people on how they are segregating waste, what are the waste that they generate at home, is there something they can do to reduce the waste that they have at home. Then they went back, did a lot of research, and then they did an awareness drive in their societies to show how composting can be done in their balconies, in their own yards, things like that. So you can connect your content so well with society, with parent involvement, because obviously that's something you want in your classes. You can do something where the students are going out into society and looking at that concept out there in the society, how they can actually make impacts. And that can happen in form of assessments or plain on strategies in your classes. So that's up to you how you want to do it. But try to engage them in different ways when you're doing assessments more than paper pen tests. You want to bring in a lot of variety so that you can assess children based on their intelligences rather than just a linguistic intelligence that we're looking at when we do paper and pen tests. Summative assessments, as we try to include thoughts, that is higher order thinking skills, according to Bloom's taxonomy. Questions can be pictorial, can be descriptive. You can have questions that are related to real problems in the real world in there. So synthesis questions, evaluation questions. Those kind of questions obviously allow for MI kind of style of questioning to come in into your papers. Now, this obviously it's limited how we can use it because curriculum sort of limits it, the kind of questions we can pose. So formative assessment is something where you can do a lot more of MI than maybe in a summative assessment paper. So that's about it of MIs, what we were talking about. To close the session, if you look at tests in general, a lot of teachers have a lot of problem with standardized tests because we all know that if we have a standard test, we are not being fair to a lot of students because we are obviously either making it too simple for a set of students or we're making it too complex for a set of students, and we are not really having a very good picture of where the student stands in terms of understanding. Just because they couldn't perform in a written test does not mean they don't know the concept. That's what we know as teachers. So why not make our teaching also unstandardized? So it cannot be standardized in your classroom because obviously your children are coming with all these kinds of intelligences, these strengths and things that they are not really good at, and we want to cater to all of it in our classrooms. That's what we want to do with MI. So this, the clip that you can see on the slide, it's available on the internet as well. It gives you a brief idea of the things that you can include under each intelligence. So if you just pin it up near your workspace, you'll probably get a lot more ideas to put in your strategies. Um, so I have a few bits of information for you on Padlet. I'm going to share the link for you all. If you can go there and just look at it whenever you have time. Okay, so this link will give you some of the information that I've put up. So if you look here, I have a couple of videos that talk about Station, the activity that I talked about earlier, how to use Station. I also have a list of a blog on classroom activities that you can use for different intelligences. There's an MCQ of FAQs list of questions that people generally ask about MI, and Howard Gardner himself has sort of given the responses in that list. I also have some sample MI checklists for you, which you can directly use from the site or create something that's more personalized for your own classrooms. So a lot of information around this is available online. So there's not much that you cannot recommend, I mean, Google and find out for yourselves. But I think I've sort of given you a glimpse of how I look at MI in the classrooms. Um, I've already shared the link upstairs. Somebody has asked for the link. If you just scroll up, you can see it in the chat box. Yeah. So that's about it. I'm open to questions now. If anybody has questions, you can put it up on the chat box and I'm going to look at it. I hope I was not too fast when I spoke. So if you have any questions, you can pose it to me now, or we're almost done with the session. Yes, I think the entire session is recorded, so whoever needs the PPT, it will be available for you. I can also put it up on the Padlet for you all if you want to refer it anytime. Yeah, sharing the link again for the ones who missed it. Thank you so much. If there's any feedback to put up, you can always put it up. Online classes, if you want to put MI, obviously this is the best platform right now. If you give them tasks where they can individually create something for you all, so they have to create a small video of a particular concept where they are either creating it like a documentary where they're talking about it with a PPT on the back or a video on the back. They can do something like that. They can create a representation. So what I did for one of my classes was, obviously I'm a science teacher, so I tend to go for science examples. But one of the tasks that the kids had to do was they had to create a device which would use minimum amount of force to shoot off a glue stick to the maximum distance. So if they had to do that, they had to create a model to show how they could do that. So some of the students just used plain rubber bands to shoot off the glue stick. Some of them actually made wind propelled models, which they had to blow and the glue stick went from one end of the classroom to the other. So there are ways in which they come up. You just have to give them the task and they can think of so many things out of the box, and there's no limit to that. For activities with grade 1 children, hands-on activities are the best way to go about it. You can use clay. If you don't have clay at home, you can use maida, atta mixtures to make things. I think textural activities are the best for them because that's how they're learning right now. If you go out into your garden, take leaves out from your garden, do impression art with them. You can also do mini experiments where you're using turmeric and lemon and showing them color changes and then talking about how things react. You can also extract dyes from flowers, hibiscus, if you mash it up and sort of extract the colors out of it and dye clothing or handkerchiefs with them. That's something they're going to have fun with. Yeah. And these concepts sort of add on to concepts that they're going to learn in the future as well. Physical education and sports. Okay, what we did for physical education, we connected PT classes with the concept of pressure in our classrooms. So constructing a pyramid obviously reduces pressure on the lowermost pole. So that's something we did with the PE class. We also talked about how if you're playing football, obviously, you want to play football on a smoother surface because your ball goes much faster that way. We also talked about how angle and wind factors matter, all those kind of things. So if I'm integrating it, obviously I'm talking about all of this in the class, but I also put the physical education coach into the loop so that he can sort of give them tips in his own subject where they can sort of use these tips and tricks to get better with their sport. But I'm talking about the physics concepts in my classroom. So that's the kind of integration that you're looking at when you're looking at MI there. If the students obviously are not so inclined in your sports sessions out there, the engagement can be brought in if you show them people who are actually good at this sport, who can do impossible feats in this sport. So people who have broken records maybe. So if you have somebody who is challenged in your classroom, obviously going to try it a little more. So that interest has to come in into your class before you can actually get them to engage in your class. There are different ways you can do it. You can invite people from the field to talk to your children about it. You can show them videos or challenge them into a task where it's not only physical strength that is required, but also some intellect or some kind of strategizing. Those kind of methods work. Okay, I think I've dealt with some of the questions that are there. The question is, somebody has asked, I've already put it on the Padlet, so you can refer there. But yes, somebody has said that children, we ourselves get confused with what smart category we fall into. Yes, because obviously we have all the intelligences, but there are things that we are really good at or we really enjoy doing. Okay, like I love to do art, but I don't have much time for it. But I know I'm good at it and I like doing it. So I know I'm strong in that particular field, but I'm not a very bodily kinesthetic person. Even though I like to go out, it doesn't mean I love doing sports and all that. So I know I'm not really great at that particular skill. So you don't have to be very clear cut about what kind of smart a child is or you are. You just have to figure out what they really like, and then that will lead you into the strategies that you want to use in your classroom. And obviously, when you do that, you will see that there are children who don't like writing down things. So, you know, linguistic challenges are there. So, can you make the linguistic element more interesting in your classroom? Yes. Show some videos, have them do speeches or dialogue writing or show some movie clip related to your task, things like that. Yeah. Primary kits for assessing MI, pictorial checklists are the best where you have very simple questions. I like to go out on walks in the garden. I like animals. I like reading books. I like painting. Those kind of questions will give you an idea of the MIs. You have to just downsize the kind of questions that you're asking them. And primary kids generally it's very obvious because they are so expressive about the hobbies or interests that they have. So it's really easy for you to figure out what their inclinations are at. I agree with Mr. Dinesh. Discipline will not be an issue if they learn a lot when they are enjoying as well. So obviously, in the first few sessions, feel a little overwhelming, and it goes back to normal. Classroom activities for science. I gave a couple of examples here which can be used. So you can go back to the slide and sort of look at some of the tasks that it can include. The internet also has a lot of ideas for all kinds of concepts. Stations are something that is used in a lot of foreign schools. So you can look at those activities. A lot of them are designed for science. And most of the strategies what I talked about, we have used this in primary years. If you say 5 to 6 years old, we are talking about very young kids. So you have to go at very basic level with them. Artwork is something that you want to incorporate in most of your classes. Model work maybe. You can use rhyme rhythm with them. Almost everything. Just downsize it for the age that you're dealing with. I think that's about it.
So we've got what we would say rave reviews. So
Thank you so much. I hope to see you all soon.
I'm sure. I think there were 170 of us at a certain point of time in the webinar, and all of us found tremendous value in the session and learned a lot. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again for agreeing to do this, and it was a wonderful session. And yeah, I think we'll close the session for now. Then, thank you
Yes.
once again. Thanks a lot for attending,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Thank you. Have a great
Goodbye.
day.